When Michael Jackson died in 2009, court filings would put his debt above $500 million. Newspapers printed one word: broke. But 2 years earlier, his own accountant signed a balance sheet showing $567 million in assets. And the man who kept those assets off the auction block had bought the one that mattered 24 years earlier for $47.5 million. So how does someone die $500 million in debt and become a $2 billion estate? It comes down to one paradox, 3 deals, and a number a judge compared to a used car. Start with that balance sheet, because it breaks the whole story open. Dated March 2007 and obtained by the Associated Press, it valued Jackson's assets at $567 million against $331 million in debt. On paper, his net worth was $236 million. In actual cash, he had $668,000. That is the paradox in a single line. He owned more than almost anyone alive, and he could not reach the money. His stake in one music company alone was carried on that sheet at $390 million, and you cannot pay a mortgage with a stake in a music company. His wealth was locked inside things he would not sell: a catalog, a ranch, a lifestyle, none of which fit through the narrow door of a bank account. So when people say Michael Jackson died broke, the paperwork disagrees. He died illiquid. There is a difference, and that difference is the entire reason his estate is worth billions today. Now, the debt itself was real, and it was enormous. A petition his executors filed in a Los Angeles court in 2024 put it above $500 million, spread across more than 65 separate creditors. Filings suggest it had already reached around $140 million by 1998, and it nearly doubled over the following decade. Some of it was in default. Some of it carried interest that had climbed from just under 7% to nearly 17%. The whole pile was compounding by roughly $30 million a year, faster than most people earn in a lifetime, just sitting there. Every month he did not pay it down, the hole got deeper, and he was not paying it down. A normal person drowns under that in a month. Jackson was not a normal person, and the reason he stayed afloat traces back to one decision he made in 1985. That year, an entertainment lawyer named John Branca walked his client into a bidding war over a music publishing catalog called a TV. This is the part almost everyone gets slightly wrong. So here are the actual stakes. A TV did not just hold a few Beatles songs. It held the rights to roughly 4,000 compositions, and around 250 of them were written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Now, publishing is the quiet, boring half of the music business, and it is where the durable money lives. Owning the publishing means owning the song itself, not just one recording of it. Own the song, and you get paid no matter who performs it, in any language, on any platform, every time it plays, for as long as the copyright lasts. McCartney wanted his own songs back and assumed he had it handled. Jackson outbid him. The price was $47.5 million, though Branca has said the net cost came closer to $41.5. And Branca has told the story that Jackson's own advisors warned him it was wildly overpriced, and that Jackson just listened, smiled, and said, "Get me that catalog." Here is the irony almost nobody mentions. McCartney was the one who had told Jackson years earlier that publishing was where the real fortune was made. Jackson took the advice, then bought the rights out from under him, and the friendship never fully recovered. It became one of the smartest purchases in the history of the music industry, and it is the reason the word broke never actually fit. Every single year, that catalog threw off cash and climbed in value, sitting at the very top of Jackson's balance sheet as the biggest thing he owned. Then, in 1995, needing money, he sold half of it to Sony, folding it into a new company called Sony ATV. He now held 50% of something twice the size, one of the largest song libraries on Earth. But there is a trap buried inside an asset that valuable. It makes perfect collateral. And across the next 2 decades, Jackson borrowed against it, and then borrowed against it again, until he was leaning on the one asset that was supposed to keep him rich. So where did $500 million in debt actually come from? Not from one catastrophe. It came from roughly 20 years of spending far more than he earned. A forensic accountant who testified at Jackson's 2005 trial estimated he was burning through $20 to $30 million a year beyond his income. His lawyers disputed that figure, and it is fair to flag it as sworn estimate rather than confirmed fact. But the shape of the spending is not really in question. There was Neverland, the 2,700-acre ranch he bought in the late 1980s for a reported $17 to $19 million. Then poured tens of millions more into building a private amusement park with a zoo and a fairground that cost millions a year just to keep the lights on. There were the legal bills, and they were staggering. In 1993, he settled a civil claim out of court for an amount that leaked years later, reported at somewhere between $15 and $25 million. Then in 2005, he stood trial on criminal charges, was acquitted on every single count, and paid for years of a top defense team and round-the-clock security to reach that verdict. Santa Barbara County alone spent $2.7 million just prosecuting the case. And underneath all of it, quietly, he kept borrowing against the catalog. A $300 million loan secured by his music was refinanced, and then refinanced again through Barclays, each round buying time and stacking on cost. By the time he died, the interest alone was eating him alive, and he personally owed $40 million to the promoter of a comeback tour he had not yet played. That tour was called This Is It. 50 shows at London's O2 Arena, completely sold out. The paydays already borrowed against before he sang a single note. He had even taken on a personal physician for the run, at a reported $150,000 a month, a doctor who would later be convicted over Jackson's death. The comeback existed because he needed it to. It was meant to be the thing that finally cleared the debt. Instead, he died 3 weeks before opening night, and the entire $500 million balance sheet dropped straight onto his estate. He never set foot in Neverland again after the trial, and years later the estate would sell it for $22 million, less than half of what he had sunk into it. Here is where you would expect a fire sale. A dead artist, $500 million in the hole, creditors circling the catalog. Sell the crown jewel, pay everyone off, close the book. Branca did the exact opposite, and it is the most important financial decision in this entire story. Named co-executor in Jackson's will, he refused to sell the catalog and chose instead to squeeze money out of everything surrounding it. The first move landed within months of the funeral. Sony paid $60 million just for the rights to Jackson's rehearsal footage, cut it into a film called This Is It, and that film grossed $268 million worldwide, opening to over $100 million in its first 5 days alone. It is still the highest-earning concert film ever made. Then came the 3 deals that flipped the whole narrative. In 2016, Sony bought the estate's half of that music company, the one holding the Beatles' rights, for $750 million. In 2018, it paid another $287 million for the estate's stake in a second publishing giant. And in early 2024, Sony bought roughly half of Jackson's own catalog for a reported $600 million in a deal that valued his music at more than $1.2 billion, the largest transaction ever struck for a single artist's work. And the estate negotiated to keep a bigger share of the royalties on the half it held on to. Stack a Broadway musical called MJ which won 4 Tony Awards and grossed around $85 million before spinning off touring and West End runs. Add a Cirque du Soleil show in Las Vegas that has passed 5,000 performances and been extended through 2030. Add streaming that never sleeps. And the debt did not just get paid down. It disappeared entirely. That $47.5 million bet from 1985 has now generated more than $1 billion in total. And the same lawyer negotiated both ends of it, the purchase and the payoff, 39 years apart. There is a blunt phrase in the industry for what happened next. Jackson became worth more dead than alive. Freed from the spending, the lawsuits, and the interest that had been drowning him, the assets could finally just do their job. And Sony was the buyer nearly every time, because Sony understood exactly what it was buying. If you want the money story hiding behind the famous name, the version that lives in the court filings instead of the headlines, subscribe because we do exactly one of these every week. And stay for this next part, because the single strangest number in the whole story is still coming. And it is the price the estate put on Jackson's own name. When someone dies in America, the government taxes the value of what they owned, and that includes something called the right of publicity, the commercial worth of their name and their face. Jackson's estate filed its tax return and valued his name and likeness at $2,105. That is not a typo. $2,105 for the most recognizable entertainer who has ever lived. The IRS read that figure, and it came back with a valuation of its own, $434 million. That is the gap the headlines never put in front of you, and it went to war in the United States tax court for the better part of a decade. Across the 3 assets still in dispute, the estate argued they were collectively worth about $111 million. The IRS argued $481 million, and the government was reportedly chasing more than $700 million in taxes and penalties. Then in 2021, the judge handed down his ruling, and it was a rout. He set the value of Jackson's name and likeness at $4.15 million, a tiny fraction of what the government had demanded. And in the written opinion, the court compared the estate's original figure to the price of a heavily used 20-year-old car. The government's own valuation expert was picked apart on the stand and largely discredited, and the extra penalty the IRS had tried to attach, which could have added hundreds of millions more, was thrown out. The estate, put plainly, won. And that verdict reaches far past one tax bill, because it stamped an official value on the machine Branca had spent a decade building, and it confirmed in a federal courtroom that the man the newspapers had buried as broke was sitting on one of the most valuable catalogs on the planet. The ruling settled the tax fight's biggest question, but not the entire case, and until every last piece is closed, the estate still cannot fully pay out. Hold on to that, because it is about to matter to the people who actually loved him. Because today, that machine runs harder than it ever did while he was alive. Forbes has ranked Jackson the highest-earning dead celebrity almost every year since his death, crediting the estate with $105 million in a single recent year, and its 2025 accounting puts the total earnings since 2009 at $3.5 billion. Now be careful with that number, because it gets reported wrong constantly. It is cumulative. It is everything the estate has pulled in across 16 years, not what the estate is worth today, which most outlets place closer to $2 billion. And in 2026, the machine got a brand new engine. A biopic titled Simply Michael, starring Jackson's own nephew in the lead and Miles Teller as the lawyer who built the estate, opened in April and crossed $1 billion at the global box office, the first film of its kind to ever reach that mark. It reportedly cost around $155 million to make, and had its final act reshot after a legal settlement, and it still became the highest-grossing music biopic in history. In the 4 weeks after it opened, the catalog picked up an estimated 748 million additional streams, and Jackson's monthly audience on Spotify spiked past 100 million people. Every one of those plays now feeding a catalog Sony half owns. The money keeps printing, but the story has one final turn, and it is the uncomfortable one. Almost none of that fortune is actually reaching his children. The estate is still tangled in that dispute with the government, and the fight has held up the full payouts to his heirs for years, leaving them on an allowance while the lawyers and the business roll on. His mother, Katherine Jackson, who fought the 2024 catalog sale in court and lost, has drawn more than $55 million from the estate over the years. And in 2025, his daughter, Paris Jackson, took the executors to court, accusing them of steering money to their own attorneys and of leaving $464 million parked in what she called improper, highly speculative investments. A judge ordered $625,000 in fees returned to the estate. She has received around $65 million in benefits herself, and says the fight is about protecting the rest of the family. So the biggest posthumous fortune in music history flows past the very people who were closest to him, paying the lawyers, the business, and the government first. And that is the second time this exact story has landed on the estate of a king. Elvis Presley and Michael Jackson hold the two most valuable names in the history of dead celebrities, and the connection is closer than it looks, because Elvis's only daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, was for 2 strange years in the 1990s married to Michael Jackson himself. She inherited the other king's fortune, a trust once worth more than $100 million. She blamed a former manager for gutting it, and by her own court filings, she died in 2023 with roughly $14,000 left to her name, still owning Graceland with almost nothing in the bank. One estate turned crushing debt into billions. The other turned a fortune into almost nothing. We traced that second collapse all the way down, too, and it is on screen right now.